everyone, this is Oksana, host of Easy Exposure, the tutorials about photography. And in this video, as I promised, we will be talking about bracketing. Bracketing is taking the same photo with different settings. And there are a few different types of bracketing you can do. First of all, it's exposure bracketing. You can also do flash bracketing, white balance bracketing, as well as focus and depth of field bracketing. In this video, we will mainly focus on exposure bracketing. And as you probably can already guess, exposure bracketing is taking the same photo with the different exposures by changing one of the exposure settings, either aperture, shutter speed, or ISO. So when would you actually use exposure bracketing? Well, first of all, I would use exposure bracketing in some difficult lighting conditions when I want to play safe and make sure I have a good exposure. And those lighting conditions could be in the middle of the day when your shadows are too dark and your highlights are too light, or also when you photograph in subject which is backlit, as well as if you have a very light or very dark scene. So in those cases, it's better to be safe and take more pictures with different exposures. This way you will even have more flexibility in post-production. And very often in those conditions, one of those bracketed exposures might be even better than the one camera told you to do. And talking about post-production, one of the most common uses of bracketing is HDR photography. This is when you take multiple images taken with different exposures and combine them into one. And now let's talk how do you actually do exposure bracketing. First of all, if you're just doing exposure bracketing to make sure that you have a correct exposure, you can hand hold your camera. And if there is slight difference between the frames, it's not a big deal. But if you're doing exposure bracketing to combine them into an HDR image, I would highly recommend you to use a tripod or at least something where you can stabilize your camera. Also, if you're just doing exposure bracketing to make sure that your exposure is correct, you can change any of the exposure settings, either shutter speed or aperture or ISO. But if you are planning to combine images into HDR, I would recommend you to change shutter speed, because if you change the aperture, you might have a different depth of field in your different images, or also if you change your ISO, your noise will be different in different images, so it's better to change shutter speed. Also, there are two ways you can do your bracketing in the camera. First of all, you can do it manually, and you can use two ways. You can either do it in manual mode and just change your settings manually, or you can do it in aperture priority or shutter speed priority and use exposure compensation, about which we talked in my previous video. Also, some cameras, actually a lot of cameras nowadays, have auto exposure bracketing function, and I will also show you how to use that. Let's start with manual exposure bracketing. I'm using Nikon D610. This is how you do your exposure bracketing in manual mode. Of course, first of all, you will set your camera into manual mode, and then you will look through your viewfinder and see what exposure camera tells you to set. You will check your light meter inside your viewfinder. And in my case, it's f8 and shutter speed 1/250th of the second. Let's assume I want to take 5 different frames with a different exposure, one stop of light between each. So in this case, I will have to slow my shutter speed down 2 stops, which will give me 1/60th of the second. I will take a picture, then I will speed my shutter speed up 1 stop, take a picture, then go to what camera tells me is my ideal exposure is 250. Then I go to 500, and then I go to 1000. And then I will take a picture on each of my stops. In this way, I will have 5 different images from the lightest to the darkest. I like to do it this way because then I will have them in order. If you don't feel like calculating all those full stops, you can do the same more automatically in aperture priority or shutter speed priority mode by changing exposure compensation. Let's change my camera into aperture priority, which I prefer. And let's find our exposure compensation button, which is right here. And my exposure compensation can go all the way to -5 stops. So I can take picture by setting camera to each of those stops, like -5, -4, -3, and it goes all the way to +5. If I would take a picture on each of those stops from -5 to +5, I will get 11 different frames with different exposure. You actually rarely will need so many. You can take less, but this option is given to you with this camera. Some other cameras can have maybe less range of the exposure compensation. And now I will show you how to do auto exposure bracketing. You can use manual mode and set your main exposure manually according to light meter in your camera, or you can use, let's say, aperture priority mode and let camera to set your main exposure. First of all, you will need to find your auto exposure bracketing button, and in different cameras it might be in a different place. In my camera, it is right here assigned with BKT, though in some cameras it can be assigned with AEB, or even you will have to go inside the menu to find this function. When you press your auto exposure bracketing button, you will get two numbers on the screen. One has letter F next to it, and that means that this number stands for amount of frames I can get. And you can change this number by dialing your main command dial. So if I dial it this direction, it will give me 3F, which means that I can get one normal exposure, one underexposed image, and one overexposed image. This is maximum frames my camera can give me with this function, but there are some cameras which can give you more. Also, when I dial it this direction, I will get -2F, which means I will get one normal exposure and one underexposed image. And then when I keep on dialing, I will get +2F, which gives me one normal exposure and one overexposed image. Also, we have the second number right here, and this is the difference between the frames, the difference in light between the frames. I can go, and to change this number, I will be dialing this right here, subcommand dial. So by dialing this dial, I can get the difference of light between the frames all the way from 1/3 of the stop till 1, 2, 3 stops of difference. So let's say I set my camera to 3 frames with 1 stop of difference between the frames. So in this case, I will just have to press my shutter button 3 times, and you will see that my shutter speed will be changing. See, it goes to 500, and now it goes to 1 2/25. And then when you took your third frame, it went back to normal. If you don't want to count your frames and do it very fast, you can also opt for a burst mode. In my camera, burst mode is right here. You just press this button and dial the dial to CH. And all you have to do is just hold your shutter button and it will shoot 3 images in a burst mode, right here. There is one more thing I would like to show you. When you go to menu and you go to this pencil icon, which is custom setting menu, and then to letter E, which is bracketing and flash, and press on it, and you can go to bracketing order, and you can change order of your bracketed frames. First order is from a normal image to underexposed and then to overexposed, but the second one makes more sense to me because you go from the darker to lighter, and I would choose this one. In this one you will shoot first underexposed image, normal, and then overexposed. If you like this method but your camera can only shoot 3 frames, there is still workaround if you want to shoot more. You can shoot 3 sets of images. One set, 1 stop over and underexposed, then one set, 2 stops under and overexposed, and then a third set, 3 stops under and overexposed. We will get 9 images total, 3 of which will be identical, and according to camera meter, those are the images with correct exposure. If we remove 2 of them, we will get 7 bracketed images with 1 stop difference between each frame. And last but not least method of getting 9 bracketed exposures is to use both auto exposure bracketing function as well as exposure compensation. And you can do that aperture priority mode. And first of all, I would check that your exposure compensation is on 0. Then we will set our auto exposure bracketing to 3 frames, 1 stop of difference between each, and we will take 3 pictures. We will get the first set of 3 images, one normal, one stop over, and one stop underexposed. After that, we will set our exposure compensation to -3 and take 3 pictures again. This way we will get 3 more images, 2, 3, and 4 stops underexposed. And at the end, we will set our exposure bracketing to +3 and take 3 pictures again. This way we will get 3 more images, this time overexposed. At the end, you should end up with 9 bracketed images with 1 stop difference between them. Also, I wanted to show you that you can set auto exposure bracketing using your back screen just by pressing info button. This can be useful if your camera is so high on the tripod that you cannot see your top screen. But it works the same, just press your auto exposure bracketing button and use main and sub command dials. The same way you can set here your exposure compensation as well as your settings like shutter speed or aperture. And when you're done with your bracketing, do not forget to set everything back to 0. And also you can set your burst mode back to a single shot mode. When doing auto exposure bracketing, most of the cameras can shoot 3 images. Though there are some cameras which can even shoot 5, 7, or 9. And this is the list of Canon cameras which can shoot 7. And this is the list of Nikon cameras which can shoot even 9. As you can see, Nikon win a little bit in this competition. If you liked my video and you want to learn more about HDR photography, this is what my future video will be about, and I will post the link to it below. If you want to watch it, as soon as it comes out, I will post the link. And thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you. Please subscribe, comment, and like this video, share with your friends, and ring that bell. I guess it's a new feature on YouTube now. If you want to be notified about my new videos, please ring that bell. And also follow me on other social medias, like on my Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and you will be up to date what I'm up to and when my new videos come out. And I will really like to have you as my follower. I see you next time. Bye-bye. Hello and welcome to Easy Exposure, the tutorials about photography. Tibuka, what do you want? You want to go for a walk, you stinky winky?